Jupiter is much more than the planet of expansion and luck. For those of you who've ever been on an airplane, there's this feeling that often embodies an individual when they see the world through the lens of high above. Suddenly, our world, feels very big and often overwhelming to us. We begin to feel smaller through a higher perspective. The problem that we once had could start to begin to feel small also. Or we could start to wax poetic or attribute meaning to this world that we live in beneath the clouds. You see all the ways that the little cities form, almost like they're micro machines. One time I was on a plane and I started to see the little towns below, all the cars moving, shifting through these carefully planned out patterns, streets, roads. And I thought to myself, wow, we're truly the gut bacteria of the universe. Now, this is the nature of Jupiter. Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. In fact, it is a gargantuan planet when we look at it in terms of the other planets in our universe. So it has this very huge presence in our lives. It rules the ability for things to expand or seem larger than life. This is a planet that really stretches the limits of what's possible. It's always searching for higher meaning, higher purpose. Thus, Jupiter really represents our belief systems, our principles. It shows us how we expand, how we take in knowledge, and of course, how we grow from that experience. Archetypically, Jupiter represents expansion, growth, knowledge, morality, and abundance. It's easily the metaphor of the professor, but it's also really optimistic and it makes things bigger, like larger than life. So it's also the gambler, the risk taker. Jupiter is our morality, and it can really show us what we believe life to be. It's here to experience a wide variety of different types of culture. So it shows us our ability to travel, to grow physically or philosophically, even spiritually. Jupiter is our reasoning through the world. Jupiter rules cultures outside of our own, university level learning, the stretching of our boundaries in order to have a higher purpose. And it also rules publishing and broadcasting, the things that are universal. Books, they really create the ability to connect us to higher beliefs or principles, as does broadcasting. We can learn a lot from podcasts, from television, documentary style learning. So Jupiter, it really shows us the things that give our life like this higher purpose and a higher mind. It also rules over luck and fortune. It is the place in our chart where we seek adventure and grow through personal experiences. Some low vibrations of Jupiter can be like gambling or feeling wildly restless and unable to settle down. It can be self-aggrandizing, overconfidence can be a low vibration here. So what happens when Jupiter is in Leo, the sign of the sun? The sign that wants to be seen, the sign of the inner child. Well, when these people walk into a room, they take up space. Not because they want to dominate, but because they feel compelled to express the fullness of their being. There's a bravery here, a real courage to stand in the light, even if it casts shadows around them. And this courage, it's vital. Life demands a big ego if we're going to grow, right? And Jupiter teaches us that growth always comes with risk. To expand, to leap, to say yes before the path is fully clear. That's where Jupiter's energy lives, especially when it's in Leo. Think of risk not just as financial or even professional risk, but emotional, spiritual, a relational risk. Jupiter here, it encourages us to dare to show ourselves as we truly are. And that can be really terrifying for some. especially those of us who have learned to shrink, to hide, to minimize our presence. But the inner child doesn't know fear the way that adults do. The inner child is animated here. Very curious, unafraid to make mistakes. So it falls, it gets back up, it tries again, and it laughs as it stumbles. This is the essence of Jupiter's courage. The willingness to take up space, the willingness to fail, and the willingness to keep believing in the possibility of life's abundance. Imagine someone walking into a room filled with strangers. The cautious ego hesitates. It might calculate how things might be judged. But the Jupiter and Leo ego, with the inner child within, bounces in with bright eyes, a smile, an idea, a story, a joke. And sometimes it fails spectacularly. But more often, it opens doors. It draws people, into its realm, and it sparks opportunities. And this is why we say Jupiter is lucky, because it creates its own luck here through confidence, enthusiasm, and the courage to risk being seen. The big ego here is not self-importance. It's a belief so pure that it becomes magnetic. People are drawn to it because it's fearless. Fearless in the expression of joy, curiosity, and human potential. But let's pause for just a moment and consider the shadow side. Jupiter's big ego can tip into overconfidence or even entitlement or overextension. That inner child can become demanding, insistent, and even at times naive. It can believe in its own abilities so strongly that it underestimates challenges or disregards consequences. Here, the lesson becomes clear. Expansion without grounding can backfire. Jupiter teaches us that true growth, it requires both courage and also discernment, both belief and humility. The inner child, it must really learn to navigate the world with eyes open while still preserving that, spark of joy and fearless wonder that makes them magical. Jupiter in Leo has a really magnetic kind of strength, one that comes from its ability to believe in itself without needing permission. So there's this natural warmth and generosity here, a confidence that says, if I shine, we all shine. So this placement, it tends to expand the heart, fueling a desire to uplift others and to create something that truly inspires. It carries the charisma of a natural performer and the leadership instincts of someone who wants to make life feel bigger, more colorful, and more meaningful. So their strength, it really lies in their emotional generosity, their sense of play, and their willingness to take creative risks. They can make other people feel really seen, valued, and even celebrated. Jupiter in Leo expands through authenticity, through living as the truest version of themselves and giving others permission to do the same. They're natural encouragers with a kind of radiant optimism that can turn even setbacks into stories of triumph. Their faith in life is expressed through creativity, passion, and heart. And when they trust themselves fully, they become the living proof that joy and courage are spiritual acts. Now, let's talk about practices, ways to channel Jupiter's big ego positively. One practice is reflection. If you have this placement, asking yourself, where am I expanding unnecessarily? And where am I shrinking when I should be shining? Another is journaling from the perspective of your inner child, letting that animated, curious, playful voice speak without judgment. Another practice is storytelling. Jupiter loves stories, and telling your own story really helps solidify your presence in the world. So if you have Jupiter in Leo, share your dreams, your struggles, your humor, even your mistakes. Because this act of expression, it builds courage and it reinforces self-worth. It keeps that inner child alive. Risk-taking is also essential. You can begin with taking small risks. Say yes to invitations that scare you at times. Speak up in meetings. Perform a little bit in your daily life. Push yourself just outside of your comfort zone. Every leap that you take, it reinforces the idea that life is abundant. And of course, that courage is contagious. And that the world is so big enough that it wants your light to shine. And as you practice this, you will begin to notice something profound. The big ego doesn't make you arrogant. It just makes you alive, a performer. It reminds you that growth is joyful, that failure is a teacher, and that your inner child is not only safe to shine, but it actually demands it. Let's integrate philosophy here too. Jupiter's ego is not just about being seen in Leo. It's about believing in the worthiness of life itself. Philosophically, this placement teaches us that optimism is a spiritual practice. To believe in life's abundance, even when the world seems limited, that, my friends, is revolutionary. It is the courage of oneself distilled into action. It's daring to live fully and generously, even when the outcome is uncertain. And it's in this interplay between courage and playfulness, between risk and trust, that we find the core essence of Jupiter's big presence in our lives. A radiance that cannot be contained, a curiosity that will not be silenced, and a belief that life is always bigger than fear. From an evolutionary astrology perspective, Jupiter in Leo is the soul's lesson in rediscovering its own divine creative power. It represents the journey towards the authentic self-expression and the reclamation of one's inner royalty after lifetimes of either suppressing the self or misusing the power of visibility. So this is a placement that really tests the relationship between ego and divinity, between confidence and arrogance, and between personal pride and collective inspiration. In the early life, there can be some confusion around what it means to be special when we have this placement. The native may have experienced lifetimes of being ignored or ridiculed, even overshadowed, which creates this very deep hunger for acknowledgement. And this hunger, it can really manifest as this attention seeking or overcompensation, as if the self must constantly perform in order to earn love. Or in the opposite direction, it can lead to false modesty, a shrinking, out of the fear of being too much, or wanting to give others their due. But Jupiter in Leo, it asks the soul to bridge this divide. And they do so by remembering that true confidence is not self-centeredness. It's actually alignment with one's own creative essence. Jupiter expands whatever it touches, and in Leo, it amplifies the themes of play and also sometimes self-importance. So early in life or early in their evolution, this can actually show up as the belief that one must be admired in order to be worthy. And this evolutionary turning point, it comes when admiration, it no longer satisfies. The person begins to sense that applause is fleeting and that the real joy of Leo is not in being seen, but seeing in, ourselves kind of clearly in the mirror, right? So this shift from performative pride to just like this inner knowing and radiance, it really marks this profound stage of growth. Because it's not about the applause of others. It's about applauding yourself. Jupiter's function is to help the soul expand its worldview. And in Leo, that expansion comes by learning to take up space unapologetically, to risk being seen in full color, and to express the inner child's joy without fear of rejection. So many people with this placement come from ancestral or past life patterns where creativity was stifled or individuality was punished. They may have been born into environments where love was conditional or based on performance or obedience. So the evolutionary lesson is to reparent the inner artist, to restore the capacity for play as a sacred act. The soul, it learns that creative freedom, it's not frivolous, it's liberation. And as consciousness evolves, Jupiter in Leo becomes this beautiful teacher of joy. The individual learns that their role, it's not merely to just receive the spotlight, but to help others remember their own light as well. So when evolved, this placement can be profoundly generous, mentoring others with genuine warmth, and the heart, it becomes a compass. The person begins to measure success not by praise or prestige, but by the aliveness that they feel when they create. And this marks a really profound shift from the egoic expansion, I'm great, to spiritual expansion. Life moves through me. The evolutionary leap is humility through joy. Now, the shadow work of Leo is often, examining how the need for validation can distort purpose. Particularly when Jupiter is here, if the person seeks, constant applause, they can really become enslaved by their own need to impress. So the soul's healing comes through the courage to be ordinary. To know that even in quiet moments of creativity, unseen by the world, they're holy. Jupiter in Leo teaches that greatness is not about dominance or perfection, but about devotion to one's gift. And the task is to let the heart be large enough to hold both pride and vulnerability, to love oneself without superiority. It's about remembering the divine child within. Leo rules the heart and Jupiter expands it. So the lesson is that joy is sacred. To laugh, to play, to create art for no other reason than just love. These are acts of spiritual courage. Many souls with this placement, they carry real generational guilt around pleasure, as if delight must be earned. So the evolutionary work is to reclaim delight as a birthright, to believe that pleasure and creativity and pride can all coexist with humility, and to lead and create not from ego, but from love. This is the archetype of the benevolent king or queen whose power serves the collective rather than self-glorification. So when integrated, Jupiter in Leo becomes the flame that lights others' candles without dimming its own. Essentially, Jupiter in Leo teaches that the soul's greatest service is to be fully oneself. The evolved Leo, it does not, demand the world watch them shine. Instead, they become the light itself. Their confidence is a quiet sun, one that radiates through generosity, creativity, and open-hearted leadership. They no longer have to perform to prove their worth. They just create because they are alive. So the evolutionary lesson of Jupiter in Leo is this: you do not need to be chosen to shine, because you're the fire that makes choosing possible.